So part of why I didn't see who I really am, as a not as a heterosexual woman,
Right.
but actually as a gay woman, I didn't see it because of all of that conditioning. It's like my identity had been fabricated for me before I was even born. It's almost like we're born and there's this costume hanging in the closet.
Welcome to the Balanced Fit and Free podcast, the podcast that goes beyond surface level wellness to explore the deep connection between inner healing and outer health. I'm your host, Rayanne Mullins, and I'm here to guide you on a journey of authenticity, intuition, and living aligned with your true purpose. Together, we'll uncover how nourishing your mind and soul leads to vibrant health and lasting happiness. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Balanced Fit and Free podcast. I'm Rayanne Mullins, your host, and I'm super excited that you're tuning in today. Today's guest is someone that I have always admired from the moment that I met her. The first time I met Jeanie Duncan was at my fitness studio, Ram Fitness. She and her friend Kate signed up for some small group training. The moment they walked in, I had a feeling that they were going to be super fun ladies, and they are. They were just a little bit older, which made me look up to them and what they were doing with their lives and their families. And I loved that they took time out of the busy life that they had to take care of their health and wellness. I also want to mention that these two convinced me to do an adventure race with them. It was called the Flying Frog Adventure Race. It involved mountain biking. I don't remember the mileage. It was a lot. Mountain biking, running, canoeing, and then some other things like archery and navigation. Anyway, I had not been on a mountain bike in like 15 years, so that was a little terrifying, but also really exciting too. And I am not one that's going to go on the water, but learning how to paddle a canoe with these two was so much fun and not scary at all. And running on the trails with them was such a blast. And I am so happy that I have this memory of doing this awesome adventure with these two. Later, Kate moved away and Jeanie and I did some training together, but eventually, like all clients, we parted ways. It was a few years later that I saw Jeanie had written a book. So, like all nosy people, I immediately found her on Facebook and scoured her page to look for evidence of like what this book was actually about. I noticed from her pictures and what was on her page that it looked like maybe she had been divorced, which honestly, at the time, shocked me. And as a side note, she does have the most adorable son who is a full grown adult now. But I can only imagine him still as the 15-year-old that I had a couple training sessions with. Anyway, as soon as I could order her book, I did. And boy, was I not disappointed. The book was so beautifully written and so vulnerable. I found myself shedding a couple tears as I read through the book. I had no idea that I could admire this human even more. And the cool part was that when she published her book, I too was going through some big shifts in my life. I was also trying to find my authentic, true self, and her book helped me along my own journey. In fact, her book made me realize I need to follow this path of inner healing, not only for myself, but to help others along the way. When I started this season of the podcast, I couldn't think of a better person to interview. So please welcome one of my idols, amazing leader, coach, speaker, and author, Jeanie Duncan. Well, welcome, Jeanie.
Hi, Rayanne.
I'm so glad that you had time to come talk to us on the Balanced Fit and Free podcast.
No
Very
place
good.
that's going to be.
Awesome. So you and I go a long ways back, but things have changed since we've been together. And so you've done a lot. And so I thought you were the perfect guest to bring onto the show. As you know, I've been talking a lot about inner healing and being your authentic, true self this whole season of the podcast. And
Nice.
I got to tell you that you're a big reason why I felt courageous enough to shift gears and start talking about inner healing. Because as you know, I was a fitness trainer, then nutrition, a little bit of mindset, but recently been really interested in like why we do the things we do. And I discovered I was not always being my true self. And so when I read your book, I'd been kind of playing with that a lot anyway. But reading your book and knowing you personally, it like totally just gave me like the, I guess, courage or bravery to like start following my true self. And everything in my life, as far as my clients and personally, has shifted in such a positive way. So I just want to thank you because it's so amazing. Yeah. So
Hearing that, it that's the reason I wrote the book.
awesome.
In hopes that somehow my own story would inspire others to, really attune to themselves and their own truth and be able to live that. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
dream for me.
Awesome. I'm so glad. I was almost kind of like nervous to tell you that. I don't know why, but it's just, it's so cool. And anyway, so I really appreciate it.
Thank
Well,
you.
so, your book actually, is such a great title, Choosing Me, The Journey Home to My True Self. It is like so awesome. It's so, so good. Um, I think really the best thing to do is maybe just start out with like your story. Like tell us, you know, what prompted you to start looking for your true self?
Hmm. You know, it all started when I was starting my own business. So I had been in the nonprofit sector, mostly in arts administration for 15 plus years. And ultimately, I was CEO of a regional arts organization here in our community. And when I left that position, I wanted to start my own business. And so, and helping a lot of different nonprofit organizations across the country. And one of the things I wanted to do in that work was support leaders of those organizations through executive coaching. And I've been coaching through the work that I had done, but I'd never gone and, got a credential in it, for example. And so
Yeah.
I believed if I'm going to do this work, I should be certified in it. So I went to coach training to get a credential. I walked in the room the morning of the first day, and hanging over the coffee area was this big banner, and it said, "Fulfillment is your birthright."
Oh,
And I'm literally just like pouring myself a cup of coffee and starting to sip my coffee. And I'm just standing there staring at that banner. And I didn't really even know what it meant.
yeah.
Like, fulfillment is your birthright. And so that's when it all began. I thought I was going for professional development. And what ended up happening is it did its work in me. It like turned me inside out. So I went from that cup of coffee to sitting in the circle with my cohort. There were about 15 of us, and there were co-leaders. And so we were all seated, still sipping our coffee. And the leaders asked two questions. One was, what would you love to be different about your life? And then a second question is, what are you longing for? And we just sat there in silence. We were supposed to make a few notes about it. And I remember gazing around the circle at, the people who would become my peers over the next 6 months, and colleagues. And I remember thinking, well, here I am. I just started my own business. I'm super excited about it. I'm in this coach training. I don't think I'm longing for anything.
Yeah.
I literally like drop my gaze on everyone else and I'm like, well, maybe you're longing for something. Maybe you people. But
Yeah.
me, I'm good here. And I
Yeah.
literally just sat there with that. I'm like, nope, I'm good. Can't think of anything. And then, that would begin the unfurling really, because then we started doing work around core values, which I know you do,
Yeah.
core values and life purpose and meeting your inner wise woman self.
Yeah.
And yeah, when we started unfolding that and I started really slowing down and turning inward and reflecting,
Yeah.
that's what happened. Like you start to see,
Mhm.
you start to really see what's there. And so that's what happened to me is I started to see. I started to see that there were parts of my life that I had fulfillment,
Yeah.
and there were parts of my life where it was just the opposite. I was so empty. I was so emotionally unfulfilled in my life,
Wow.
especially in the standpoint of my relationship with my partner, my
Yeah.
husband. Yeah. So that's what got it all
Wow.
started.
Isn't that interesting that you went thinking, I'm going to learn how to help other people.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a minute, this wasn't supposed to be about me.
Good.
Oh, I love that. I think you tell that story in your book, right?
I
A little bit
do.
about the coaching
Chapter
program.
one.
Yeah.
That's where it began.
Yeah. I have a similar, so I did breath work, the breath work facilitation certification. And again, I went into that because I was thinking about just quitting. Just I was like, I just don't want to just tell people to eat protein every day. And I don't want to just keep like I was kind of feeling not, I mean, just kind of empty as well. And then I found breath work and I went into it and they were like, you can't be certified until you do the work. And wow, that was big. So I same kind of situation. Like I didn't even know. I didn't because I thought I was good because I'd done mindset work. I'm
Right?
good.
Yeah. Here.
And then I
Nope.
was like, oh, holy cow. Yeah. But I love that. So
Yeah.
kind of peeling back from that, when you said weren't even really sure what it meant, like fulfillment is your birthright, I mean, you had a great life. I
Yeah.
mean, okay, I'll just tell you. So you're just a little bit older than me. I don't even know. But when I first met you, like you
Mhm.
were one of those people, like an idol. It was like, like when I grow up, I want to be just like her, even though you're not that much older. But like the great husband, the kid, the house, the cool job. You could go get a personal trainer. Like you just had a really cool life. And so you actually mentioned that at one point in your book that you were like, I have this, little bit of a battle because I do have a great life. You had a great life, but you weren't totally fulfilled. So what were you afraid of? Like, were you afraid just to admit to yourself first that maybe, like, tell me more about that. Like, where were you in that when you were in that moment of realizing you weren't exactly happy?
Yeah. Um, it was a total shocking moment. So in that coaching certification, there was a moment where we were doing peer coaching. So
Hmm.
as individuals learning to coach, we would coach one another. And I remember this coaching session with my peer, Anthony. I'll never forget it, where it was we were deepening that realization of fulfillment and how fulfilled are you? And I remember this thing coming out of my body, this voice that I didn't even know where it came from.
Hmm.
It's just like I almost yelped it, to him. I'm like,
Yeah.
life is so boring. And I'm like, then followed by the other part of me that gasped at that, like, how could I even say that? My life is so boring. So there was this moment as soon as those words came out that I felt this guilt, like, how dare you say your life is so boring? And where the hell did that come from?
Yeah.
I didn't know. It's almost like that voice, like whose voice is that? And I think that voice was that innermost self that felt empty and, just deeply emotionally unfulfilled. And it was searching for something. And that's how it came out. My life is so boring. And Anthony said to me, what's so boring about your life? You know? And so we coached in that. And then what do you want to do about it? And then that voice came out of my body again. I'm going skydiving. And I'm like, okay, ah! Where did that come from? And, I had thought about that before, skydiving, but I was so terrified of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way I'm going to do it. And so we went back and forth and back and forth. And before the session was over, I had committed to going skydiving.
Wow.
And so when are you going to do it? And I said, well, before the next session, which was just a month later.
Wow.
And the reason I share that is like somehow, some way, that innermost part of me that was desperately seeking and longing for something, back to that question when we first sat
Yeah.
down, what are you longing for? I was longing to be awake. There was some part of me that knew that a significant part of me was lying dormant, like not even alive. And so that skydiving experience, which by the way, I did fulfill,
Yay.
pretty terrified the
I bet.
and completely believed. because I was wanting to be awake. And it did that for me. It's become a huge metaphorical touchstone in my life. And I go every so often. I've been 3 times now, and that
Oh
was
my gosh.
time was like, 8 years ago. And my son went with me the next time, and then
Oh,
my partner, later partner, went with
yeah.
the third time. So it's become a touchstone, and the reason for that is, being equally terrified and thrilled to do something and finding your inner courage to do it.
Wow.
So that takes me to your question about, how could I um, leave basically the life that I had that was so good.
Yeah.
And that's the way I describe it. It was so good. And in fact, there's this book, business book written, Good is the Enemy of Great. And that is how I felt about my life. It was so good that
Right.
I didn't see that it could be great,
Yeah.
but it wasn't. It was a solid good, really, really good. And there was a
Right.
lot of love in our relationship, my relationship with my husband, Chuck. And we had a son, Luke, together. And yeah, we called ourselves the Three Musketeers. We were tight, close. It was happy. It was good. And so
Right.
the good kept me from seeing that I had this emptiness
Yeah.
until, I started exploring, really deeply reflecting internally about
Yeah.
what I was wanting and what was missing. And that
Yeah.
opening of the coach training and the skydiving experience, and really going, wow, I am not awake in my life, not truly awake, not truly fully alive.
Wow. Yeah. And it makes me think, we always talk about being grateful, showing gratitude, and I 100% believe in that until it covers up. I think so many people use gratitude to shove down, what they really want because they must feel guilty wanting something more. Like you were saying, it's like, you're like, "Oh, how could I want anything different? I have this great, a good, really
Hmm.
good thing." And so, anyway, I just think that's really interesting. It's like, I feel like sometimes, and I do believe in gratitude a lot, but just listening to you talk about it made me think of that. I'm like, sometimes we can gratitude ourselves into a hole of like staying stuck or still. And so
Right.
we need to use it appropriately. But oh wow.
It's
Yeah.
both can be true, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're so deeply grateful and
Yeah.
so deeply empty.
Yeah.
And once you have that awareness, what do you do about it? And there was that battle going on in me of like, how could I leave this? How could you be so ungrateful? That was the other voice inside me of, how could you be so ungrateful? Look at all you have. Is this not good enough for you?
Right.
You privileged white girl,
Yeah.
because
No, exactly. Like,
I was facing that. It's like you're coming into terms with your privilege. It's like, when is enough enough? And so that kept me silent for a long time, and it kept me silent from myself first
mhm,
and foremost. I didn't know this.
yeah.
This awareness that was sparked with the training work. It was revealing to myself of these truths, and so it was then going, well, what are you going to do about this? And so there was another moment. So all this was happening, this awareness and this acknowledgement of not really being fully alive and not, really being true to myself, like acknowledging what I wanted and needed, and as women, I think to come in the middle of your life, I find in my coaching work with other women a lot of similarities to myself of this awareness of being in the middle of your life and realizing, is this as good as it gets?
Yeah.
And I have this wonderful life, and I feel like I've given myself away,
Yeah.
that I've put myself in second or third or even fourth place to everything else in my life, my spouse, my children, my parents, my work, and so forth and so on. It's like give, 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 give until there's nothing left. And so
Yeah.
it's that acknowledgement of no, like, so if I wasn't in fourth place, maybe if I was in second place or first, choosing me is all about, yeah, if I chose me, what would that look like?
Yeah. Wow.
So the moment, another moment that was such a turning point for me is it came through the simplest daily thing, like a hobby. So I signed up for guitar lessons.
I love it.
Yeah. And I signed up with someone that I had known in the community just through my work in the arts and went to my first lesson. And this guitar instructor, this woman, we started, connecting and engaging and, I started playing and I walked away feeling so seen
Oh,
in that experience. So,
wow.
music being this creative, innovative, playful kind of outlet, I could relax. I could let go of the need to be perfect. I could let go of goals. I was just in it to it really be an expression of myself.
Right.
And I had had guitar lessons before, over the prior 10 years, but it had been a while and I came to this and I felt so seen by this other individual. And I walked away so lit up by that, so sparked. Like she gets me, she understands what I want to do, she understands the kind of music I love. She understands how to teach me, this creative um outlet. She understands, she gets me. And that was an unlocking for me. So over time, over multiple lessons, it's like because she saw me, I then began to see myself in a
Oh,
new and ultimately realizing that I'm gay
yeah.
and not having seen that before
Yeah.
until this moment. And so there was all of this realization going on that happened gradually over time. But at the time the music lessons started, I was still in my marriage, to my
Yeah.
then husband. And so all of this began to be both really confusing on the inside, like, what is this? And what am I going to do with this? And also the greatest feeling of coming home to myself. Like, it makes so much sense now. I didn't realize this before.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Wow. And that's major. That's a really big thing. And I can totally see why you would be confused and not sure how to handle. And so that brings me back to the next like thing that you talk about a lot too is like your conditioning, like growing up,
Mhm.
probably, I mean, I don't know. Like I wonder if you did know at some point, but you just knew you had to. I mean, I'm just making that up. I don't know what you felt, but it's like don't you wonder? Like maybe you knew early on, but you just knew you couldn't because of living for everybody else's expectations and what your family expected and society and what was accepted and not.
You
Um,
know, think about that,
yeah,
that conditioning. And I think about my upbringing, and I was raised by very conservative, religious, straight-laced kind of parents.
yeah,
Um, and I think of their own conditioning of their growing up, in the Depression era. And um, I think they were doing the best that they could do, and they were doing what they thought was right. And the impact on me, I had a very good childhood. I always thought of my childhood as being very idyllic.
yeah,
I remember it fondly and, very positively until I started grappling with all of these things that I'm naming that were coming up for me when I got still and turned inward and really looked at myself. And then I thought, let me go back to that childhood and really think about how was that childhood part of that layering up, all of those layers that get put on you of,
yeah,
you know, going to church every Sunday and getting good grades in school and, achieving, achieving, achieving and everything that you do, that perfectionism kind of thing. And I was the kind of kid that was very much a rules follower, wanted to please my parents and all of that. So it creates a very abiding kind of human character. And
yeah,
so, you know, hitting 20 and, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a degree, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have a family, I'm going to do, my early beginnings looked very much like my own parents' beginnings and my husband's parents' beginnings, and so it's like you're just following through with what's been cultivated in you of this is what you will do because
right.
this is what we approve of. And so I did.
Yeah.
And I didn't think a lot of, I don't think I thought a lot about it. I think I just went along and again, it was good. It felt good because it felt comfortable and like what I was used to over
Yeah.
the years of growing up, you know?
Right. I totally, I see exactly what you mean. It's like we have this almost like a silo of like working up to the top. Everything is like about like starting and getting, building your way up, build your way up, build your way up. And, but what actually struck me, what you said is like your parents, like they did do the best they did, and their parents did the best they could. And I think once you, for me, it was like once I started realizing all of the, how I felt inside, and I started seeing it on other people, like, and I had a lot more grace for my mother, who was a lot, you know. I mean, she was, a lot. A lot of my learnings have come from what she did or said or who she was. But now doing all this inner work has like really opened my eyes to like, wow, I wish she would have, like I wish that this was more available for her.
And
So
I would add to what you just shared, and I wish my mom was open to that.
yeah,
I find that she's not like, and I think a lot of people are not open to this.
no,
Just being slowing down,
hmm,
getting still with yourself,
yeah,
looking inside and seeing what's there because
yeah,
it's terrifying because you're going to see the things that you love about yourself and you're going to see the things that you might not love about yourself or the things that you are longing for that you don't know how to make possible for yourself. You don't know how to fulfill that. So I think about that, humankind in general, people don't, we're a culture, like everything around us is built, we're a culture and society that fills humans with busyness. Busy,
yes,
busy, busy. And our work is like no one works 40 hours a week. You work 50, 60, 70, 80, depending on your job and industry and, also how you're wired and designed. Like my parents were entrepreneurs and business owners growing up. So that was cultivated in me in an early age. So part of why I didn't see who I really am, as a not as a heterosexual woman,
right,
but actually as a gay woman, I didn't see it because of all of that conditioning. It's like my identity had been fabricated for me before I was even born. It's almost like we're born and there's this costume hanging in the closet that's been custom designed by you or
yeah,
for you by your
right.
parents. And I mean, I did that for my own son. Like literally, his dad and I, we started, oh, we're having a boy. Oh, we're going to give him a strong name. We're going to call him Luke. And he'll play baseball and football and, on and on and on. We like envisioned this little being before he was even born. And he pops out in the world and we're like, oh, you're Luke and you're going to play football, and it's like,
Yeah,
as children, we're going to pretty much do what our parents tell us or ask us or make available to us, and our teachers and our coaches. I mean, you,
yeah,
speak about this, all this conditioning.
yeah.
We just roll right into this identity, and then we roll right into young professional adulthood. And here we are. And again, you just go day by day by day, and you're like, I was in this marriage, I was in this work and busyness. And if there's any sadness or any longing, you just go buy something. You just go
So
do
true. Or
human beings
eat,
more than human beings.
or eat something. Just kidding.
Yeah, or eat something. Absolutely. Eat, buy, go, do. Then you'll
Exercise.
be, and it's like, oh my gosh, no, actually. So we don't slow down because our culture around us certainly doesn't give us that opportunity. You have to make it for
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
You have to force yourself. So like the coach training, it's like, yeah, we sat there in silence, which I'd never done before, for like a long period of time.
yeah,
Think
yeah.
and reflect and journal. Like we don't do this.
No.
We don't do
And
this.
that can be hard when you don't do it. When you first start doing it, it's so uncomfortable.
It
It's
is.
so, well, and it's, yeah, that's been something. And I think it still takes work. Even if you do it, you still have to like, right, tell yourself to it's okay. Because it is very easy to like have something to do, something to do, something to distract,
Mhm.
all the time.
And you
Um,
get started, realize, oh, there's some stuff in here. What am I going to do with this stuff? And you're
yeah,
like, I can't deal with this. Like, I can't be gay. I'm in a marriage. We've been married for 25 years. We
yeah.
have a son. I can't leave this. This is all I've ever known. I mean, Chuck and I met when we were 15. I've
Oh,
never known really life without him, without us, without this construct.
yeah.
What am I going to do? So I think most people go, they shut that book and they throw it out and they're like,
Yeah, they're like,
opening that
so
door.
I think it's amazing that you didn't do that. It was not easy. It was like, holy cow, so hard. But what happened? I mean, what, if you don't mind sharing, like, what was your next step? Like, what did you do to move to the next level of your life?
It was a that voice inside me, that moment of being seen. I don't think I'd ever truly been seen before in my life. And it's almost like, well, how do you know when you're seen?
Yeah.
I didn't quite know how to describe that
Okay.
because it's so powerful, like there are no words for it. But I believe now that feeling seen and understood and heard is the greatest form of love.
Ugh,
And that's what happened in that moment, in the guitar lessons over and over again, is I felt that. And so the what did I do about it is then I could then I could see myself. And once I saw myself, I couldn't unsee it.
yeah.
I could not, there was no going back. And there was quite a period of time that I sat in that space of I see it, I get it, I'm getting it, but what the hell do I do about this?
Yeah.
And it took me, it was I mean, when in a way it wasn't much time at all because this all happened within a year. The part of not that, so the coach training was like 2010. This event, this catalyst event was 2016. So that was a
Okay.
and a lot was going on between that 2010 and 2016 period. But when I was seen, when I felt seen, so many things connected for myself. And by then I was well into my business and I was coaching, so doing the work and doing the work in myself. And there came a moment, and I remember it like it was yesterday, that I'm like, not only can I do this, I'm going to do this. And what I mean by doing this is not only am I gay, but I'm going to live my true self. I'm not gonna, you know,
Get
I
it.
couldn't hide it anymore. So my point being, it grew and grew and grew and grew that true self, that voice where I couldn't not live it. And the next thing I did was have a conversation with Chuck about, I love you, but I don't want to be married to you any longer. And truly, that was the hardest thing
Oh, I bet.
I felt like I had ever done. And then shortly after saying those words to my son, which was then unraveling our life together, we are these three people and we have this beautiful family. And so to undo that was really heartbreaking for me, for all of us in different ways.
Right.
And I think the reason it worked and we have the life we have together today is because everybody showed up with love and kindness. I'm not saying it was all easygoing, but ultimately
I'm sure.
today, now we're in 2025,
Yeah.
a lot of healing has happened and we can be together. But
Good.
we separated shortly after that. Um, and it was really a commitment after that of, yeah, I'm gonna live who I am and see what this is. I don't know what this is. I don't know this part of me,
Yeah. It
but I'm
was
gonna
like being reborn. It
what's
was like
that?
you're being reborn into like a new you. I mean, not new necessarily, but upgraded version.
Well, it's interesting, and it was as if half of me was alive until that moment. And then this other half of me that had been, trying to, I guess, come out
Yeah.
all this time, but couldn't. In that moment of coming out, it was as if that other part of me, which felt like the other half of me that had been lying dormant
Yeah.
all this time, was like, okay, here I am. It's
Do this thing.
let's see who this part of me is. Let's see who I am when a more whole part of me, the whole part of me is awakened. What is this like?
Wow. So, are you so happy you did it? Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it probably.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
It's the only way.
Yeah.
I don't know what would have happened. I mean, I will never know what would have happened if I hadn't done that. But I did begin to worry at the time. So 8 years ago, 8, 9 years ago now, I began to worry if I don't do this, I feel like I'm going to get sick.
Oh,
When people get illnesses and, illness and disease, I felt like I was going to cause myself
yeah.
to go there. And I worried about that. And I
Yeah.
see that in others. If there's
Mhm.
some significant truth about yourself that you're not able to claim and stand in, I think at the cellular level, your body reacts to that. And I
100%.
believe that
I
that can
believe that too.
be illness
I
and
mean,
disease
it
conditions.
really, what is it? Dis-ease, dis-ease in your life creates disease. I really, yeah. If you think back, I mean, I think you've always been really healthy though. But I know personally, I can think back to times where I was either really
Mhm.
ill, whatever, like super fatigued or had something happen or had like gained weight or like anything physical. If I can go back to each of those times and pinpoint something in my life that was not in alignment, that's something every time. And it just think that's enough proof, right? When you can look at your own life and like,
Yeah.
and see that, wow, every single time I wasn't following my desire or path and
Mhm.
always listen to outside of me, like something physically would happen, and it's just interesting.
About your story, about, I remember in one of your podcasts I was listening to recently about cookies. You know,
Yeah. Cookie
so
Monster.
we all have our things. And for me, it was my work. And I absorbed myself in my work because it was often the place where I could most be myself. So
Yeah.
I wasn't really able to do that as much in my personal world, but I could in my work world.
Yeah.
And so I really leaned into it. And I was a workaholic, really. I was insanely busy in my job. And when I started my own business, well, that you're just birthing your baby. With that,
Yeah.
is your baby. And
Yeah.
I was so intense with it. I traveled all the time and it grew and grew and grew where my travel was about 70% of the time. And so I was running from my life. You're running yourself ragged. I wasn't getting proper sleep. I wasn't, you know, I didn't have good nutrition, probably, not as good as it could have been.
Right.
And that's what I think about with illness. It's like you're gonna the you're gonna eventually run yourself ragged into a ditch, derail yourself. Something's gonna happen. I was really lucky, like that a heart event or something like that didn't happen
Yeah.
that caused a bigger crash. And I
Yeah.
truly believe that would have been likely to happen had I not taken the steps that I took.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not
Well,
like you take the steps and then you're done.
no.
It's taking these steps every day. So I think of it like excavating yourself, and when you excavate another layer,
Yeah.
not done. It's like, oh, there's another layer to chisel off here, and
Yeah.
another, and another. And so I just, in the last 12 months, I've made some significant changes in my business, for example, because it was no longer fitting who I'm becoming even today. So it's this constant evolution.
I love that. I love that so much because I think so many people think that you do something until you get to the destination and then you're just supposed to be happy there all the time. But everything changes. Like we evolve and evolve. And so you're right. We do have to just keep peeling off the layers and keep going. Um, So tell us a little bit about your book. At what point did you decide you needed to share your story and why a book? Tell us about that.
Um, so I started writing. I didn't know that it would be a book. I just started
Okay.
a bit about my story, blogging. I did some blogging, and it was prompted by friends and people around me noticing the changes going on in my life. And, it's like, what? You're all of a sudden you're gay? What do you mean? Yeah. It's like, no, not all of a
What?
sudden. Ta-da! Switch sides like that. But
That's funny.
there were a lot of people that were asking, how did you know? And how did you do this? And how in the world did you leave what appeared to be this perfect life?
Right.
And by the way, was that fate? Like, what's going on here? And, so there were all these questions.
Yeah.
And then people would come and share stories with me about, wow, I know that you've recently gone through this huge change in your life, huge transition. I needed, I'm wanting this or that. Sometimes it was about career or sometimes it was about other relationships in their life. And I don't know
Mhm.
how to do it. How in the world did you do it? And so I would have a lot of those conversations. And then they started saying to me, you really should write about this. You should consider writing a book. And so I started thinking about that. And writing a book for me anyway was too overwhelming. I'm like, oh my God, how do you like one day just say, I'm going to write a book and then you write a book? How do you do that? And I didn't know. So I just started small. I started writing, and then a friend suggested an editor to me, and I contacted the editor, and I basically was saying, I can't imagine that the world needs one more book about, I mean, when it's yourself, you don't really think your story is that powerful or moving. And so who would care besides me and my closest friends? And so she helped me look at that and see that you do have a story to tell and people will care and this could have great meaning. And so it was working with her that helped me take those steps.
Ah.
And it took a couple of years, to do that and to share the story. And it was the kind of thing, Rayanne, where it was like night sweats. I would wake up scared. Like I'd written it and
Yeah.
it was my own. But then when I was getting further along and finishing it and coming up into publishing, I was terrified to put this out in the world. It's the skydiving thing. It's like I can talk about it and think about it and plan for it, but then when you actually flip open the door and jump out of the plane, you're like, holy
That's
hell, what am I doing? And I think most of all, I asked, what will my son think
Oh.
when he reads this? And I cared a lot too about what will Chuck think when he reads this. And my mom, that terrified me. And then I thought, oh, my mom's never going to read this. And she hasn't. So,
Oh.
and she knew I was writing a book, but she's never asked about it because, you know,
Yeah.
he is who she is.
So how is that relationship with her? Is it just something you guys gloss over or has it gotten better with her? Moms are tough.
Moms are really tough. That would be an entirely separate interview.
Conversation. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
maybe
totally get
that's part two.
that. Yeah.
The funny thing, Rayanne, is when I wrote the book, it started actually as a business book because I was too scared for it to be a memoir. So it was more my methodology and how I approach change and transition. So it was a leadership book. And then it became a memoir. I started over and wrote it through that lens. And little did I know when I did that my mom would become about 25% of the book. A quarter of the book is about my mother-daughter relationship with her. And where we are now is I was able to really understand the need to love myself. And an act of loving myself was setting some boundaries that I had been avoidant to set before. But I realized that that's actually an act of love for me and for her. And so I love her from afar. I talk to her regularly. I don't see her regularly. And it's what I have to be in right relationship with her and myself.
Well, good. And I'm sorry when I say good, I mean good that you've learned what you need Because
Yeah.
again, most people would just shut down what they need and what they desire and do what they're supposed to be like a good little girl. And, I think that it's really brave and awesome that you're choosing you. I think it's amazing. And I think that's like really why I wanted you to come on is I really my biggest passion is people like living a fulfilled life. I think it's so sad for so many people that just go their whole life and don't even know and have that feeling that you talked about, that empty feeling or like that wholeness wasn't there. And it's like it's
Mhm.
so sad. And some people just maybe they don't care. And sometimes I think maybe I should be a little less passionate about it because I want people to see it, but I love that because I mean, it's just truly, I mean, it's so brave and just so inspiring. So your story is absolutely amazing. And, especially because I knew you before all this happened. So it was like so amazing for me to like, I kind of understood from the outside still, but you know what I mean? Like, I was like, wow, it's just so amazing.
I
Um,
think with when they think of choosing me, they first think that's so selfish.
oh,
And I think that's why it took me so long.
yeah.
That's how I started the book was what took me so long. For
Oh,
me, in my story, it was to come out. Like, what took me so long to know first and then to take action? And I think that selfish conditioning of my upbringing of don't be about yourself, don't focus on yourself, focus on others is a
yeah.
big part of what kept me from that. And I think of it now differently. I think of it being self-full, like loving yourself, to choose yourself because it helps you be in service of others.
Oh. And I think as soon as you see that, but people have to see it. It's like you have to flip it. It's like the old, the old cliche saying, put your mask on first before helping others on the airplane. But it so makes sense. If you're not well, or you're not happy, you can't be your best for other people. And and every mother, like all these people that are like always putting themselves last. It's like, well, what's going to happen if like something happens to you? Like that you can't keep it up forever. So I think that's amazing. And you're right, though. I don't think it's selfish at all, but I've been feeling that way for a while. You got to be a little bit selfish to be self-full, like you said,
Yeah.
self-full. I
And I
like,
mean, helpful is just because I can't get over selfish. It's so thickly ingrained in me, so I just made up a new word.
I like that. That's a good word.
I think this really impacts women in an entirely different way that it does men.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that it doesn't impact men, that they don't struggle with this too, because I believe they do. But I think there's an entirely different conditioning that women face through their entire lives.
Yes.
Don't speak up, don't be too loud, settle down, sit down, you
I
know,
know.
that we do that. We do that until we can't do it one more time. And that's what happened. I couldn't not do this.
Yeah. And thank goodness that you discovered it when you did. I mean, it's just like, it's never too late.
It's not. You're so right.
So it's like, oh, well, I so appreciate you coming on today. How can people find you?
People can find me. My website is jeanieduncan.com. That's the best way
Okay.
to find me. And yeah, you can find me through my book on Amazon, Choosing Me, The Journey Home to My True Self, and it's on my website as well.
Okay. I'll make sure I put a link to the book and to your website in the show notes. Well, it's been such a pleasure. I so appreciate it. Maybe we'll talk again um,
That
when
would
you
be
have a
great.
second book come out. I'm just kidding.
There will be another book,
I'm
so
gonna
yeah.
say now you can do your methodology, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'll be looking forward to it because I need it apparently. Uh, well, I really appreciate your time and we'll talk to you later. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Fit and Free podcast. Remember, the key to a balanced life starts within. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please subscribe, share, and leave a review to help others on their journey. Until next time, stay true to yourself and keep living balanced, fit, and free.